This is Joseph from JohnTheHutDweller. I just wanted to bring up something I was thinking about because I was reading H.P. Lovecraft, or at least equivalent of it. There's some audiobooks of his, and also reading some stuff online. Baal, Dagon, Astaroth, Moloch, Asherah. I think the Asherah were the poles, though the phallic poles that they had. We don't know much about these gods, do we? We only see Dagon mentioned briefly in the Bible. I think he's only mentioned 2-3 times in there. Moloch, same thing, maybe 5, 7. Baal is just their name for. I mean, we don't know. It could be the opposing god of Elohim or Eloi, or if you want to. Elohim just means gods. Eloi was actually, or El. Eloi would be speaking to him. El would be the god. That he was just an opponent of Baal, and some say, well, it's the same. It's the same god. They're both ancient bull god cults. Which is why the ancient Israelites had bulls in the north instead of cherubim. Well, I mean, main difference between the two kingdoms is one worshipped God with cherubim, the other worshipped God with bulls, golden bulls. Why would the story of the golden calf? Why, out of everything, why would they make a calf? It wasn't an Egyptian symbol, primarily Canaanite, But I look up these pictures of Dagon and the fish god. Where is that mentioned? Well, no, it's kind of like if you've ever heard about Orientalism or the Renaissance Egyptology. This wrong Hellenized view of how the past should have been or would have been with these magical practices, and we know no, it's all. I mean, it's all combined with the lure of Freemasonry and all those other secret societies. All those grew up around the same time. They all had the same misconceptions of Egypt and the Near East, which was back then called the Orient. The China was not the Orient. Whenever you read anything that's all that old, if you hear Orient, a lot of times it means it was growing further. Originally meant Asia Minor, which is Anatolia, now Turkey. Then it was further to the point where it was Persia, and then beyond that, I don't know if the Indian subcontinent ever acquired the term Orient or not. Orient just means east. That's why there's Oriental Orthodox and Eastern Orthodox. The same thing. No, but this view of these pagan gods through, I mean, after 1,500 years of nobody even, I mean, over 1,500 years, like 2,500 years afterwards, and they try to reconstruct what it might have been. So Dagon and Moloch all have the symbols of the bull, or Dagon has the fish, because they're trying to relate these to other pantheons of gods. And I saw something on the Dark Secrets of Bohemian Grove where they said Moloch, his symbol was the owl. No, there was a Babylonian goddess who had a symbol of an owl, who we later on believe became Lilith, the Lilith of Adam and Eve, the vampire demon whore, or however she's depicted by the Jews, or Talmudic Judaism, I guess, Kabbalism, stuff like that. But of these gods, we really don't know anything. And there's a passage that said Moloch, which Moloch, again, I don't speak the language, but whenever I look anything up on it, it says it just means the word violence. It's just the word violence, but used as a god, just like Akbar was used as one of the gods of the Kaaba, the great, or El Shaddai, the god of the mountain, became the god of Israel. And there's a passage that says they make their children pass through fire. Well, we know there were blood sacrifices back then. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean they gave their children as burnt offerings? Yeah, it could have been that. It definitely could have been a ritual where they actually do walk through fire. Well, we know that there are different cults, and I'm not using the word cult as a bad thing. I'm using it as just religion or sect when I'm in this video. Just in this video, there are cults in India that have the same practice of walking through fire, or you can even see people walking on hot coals is similar to that. It's kind of like a test of your metal, Are you really going to do this? And we know that the Israelites weren't much different from their neighbors, their pagan neighbors, because the Israelites couldn't get the message that they should stop sacrificing their children. It didn't matter that we had the story of Abraham to tell us not to do that. That God said, "Don't ever do this," even though He commands it in the story. But He says, "Okay, don't ever do this." So did Abraham almost really sacrifice Isaac or Ishmael, whichever way you want to read it? I don't know. It's not important. The important message of that story is don't sacrifice your children. The Israelites didn't get it because we see it happening a few more times in the Bible. One who's thinking he's doing the will of God by sacrificing his daughter because it's the first thing he sees, and his daughter goes and wanders around Jerusalem. This is in the book of Judges. And then later on we see a starving time when two women are arguing and they decide to kill their sons to eat them, and one kills her son and shares the meat with the woman, and the other one the next day wouldn't bring her son to be slain. Pretty morbid stuff. But we have to look at from where this is coming. It's coming from a very ancient, dark place of the Middle East, Canaan. So these gods, we really don't know that much about them. Are they that much different than the God of Israel? Well, they are in at least one way. The God of Israel will have no other gods. There's no pantheon. There's no going, let's just use the stereotypes that we have today because we don't know anything. So a fisherman goes to Dagon for a fish, and then he may go to temple of Moloch and pray for vengeance of his enemies, and then pray to Baal to make the wheat grow, or a Shiva or Astaroth. But there were better cases of where people just didn't really, one village would have their town god, go to the next one, they'd have their own god, and that's how it was. Even when Rome sacked Jerusalem, they took the menorah and they put it in the temple of peace. They wanted to honor all the gods. They didn't have this idea that there was an exclusive God. With them, either there were gods that were from wherever, or they were gods born of much more ancient gods that came out of the chaos. Whereas the Israelite God speaks from the chaos. He draws distinction between light and dark, starts separating things. It's pretty much where we get the concept of Judaism, because Judaism is an idea where it separates the sacred from the profane, and it sets apart a people. I've made you a peculiar people. Now we can go back and say, oh, well, that really is the seeds of the Holocaust, and not just holocausts, but of the genocide that we have come to know as the Holocaust. Where you could say, yeah, look, there's this master race that says they're destined to own this land, and they're trying to go back and retake their land and expel all the people that shouldn't be there. That sounds like Germany. We have to remember that wasn't... Well, Germany was abnormal. I don't think we could put the two on the same base. Germany was abnormal. It was in the modern era, used modern weapons. These people could read, write, they could figure out any language. Languages were open to be learned. It was the modern world, so it's not excusable. Israelites' conquest of Canaan, I don't think we can excuse either. And I don't think we can just say it's the will of God and brush it off, because in the modern day we can't use that excuse, so I don't think we could go back and just start, oh, well, God's will. Had to kill those people. We had no choice. No, but I do think we have to come at it with some weight and say, hey, these pagans did have some rights, and we have to look back from, if not a Christian or monotheistic view, but sociologically, it's a loss that we don't know about those gods. And I think it's even a loss to our own faith, because what was the ancient faith of Israel contesting against? What was it speaking against? Well, we can act like children, uneducated children, and say, oh, well, look, this is associated with Dagon and Baal and Astaroth and all. But that's all modern. All the depictions, everything we have is for modern people who weren't Canaanites, who weren't Philistines, who didn't speak their language, who didn't have any part of their culture, didn't know what they were, and now are going to ascribe them different, statures of gods, different, oh, this was the god of this is the god of that. And you can't get your information really from the Jews at all, either, from any Israelite or monotheist, because you're relying on the testimony of the enemy. You know, I mean, you're going to go to somebody's enemy to tell you how they are. It's a good thing. Don't get me wrong that Israel survived and that Judaism was to go on. I'm not saying, oh, too bad, too bad the Jews didn't die in the desert. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that it's a wonder about these gods to know really what they were for, what they were used for, and what link the people had to them. Because I think if we understand what the faith was contesting against, we can really know what was believed back then. Just like with the church, we really see what people believed in the councils and the creeds because of the vicious arguments that people. I mean, the lengthy theological battles that happened with the Arians and the Nestorians, and even up until the Great Schism between the Eastern Church and the Western Church. You can really tell where someone's coming from, and a lot of times they're not all that different from the person they're arguing against because they're trying to separate themselves. They're saying, well, we're not like you and you're not like us. So could it have been, as Israel Finkelstein says, that Judaism, or as this Israelite God, sorry, my eyes are really bothering me today, guys, could it have been just an in-house debate and they decided to clear off all their gods and just keep El? Yeah, that's plausible. And that only a little segment came from Egypt, and they brought in Yahweh or I am, Yahweh, Jehovah, whatever. I don't know. These are all theories. But if any of you know of any good source about Dagon, Moloch, Astaroth, I don't think there is any, because the manuscripts that we have only go back to about 500 to 1,000 years, and they're all Western, or if not Western, non-Philistine, non-Canaanite. Or just written by the Jews, written by their enemies, or written by the Christians, the children of their enemies. Or maybe even the Muslims, the great-grandchildren of their enemies. You'll notice I said great. I'll explain that in a different video. I don't think I think there's another step between the Jews and the Muslims, or the Christians and the Muslims. Steps to theology. But again, yeah, if you guys, just like with the H.P. Lovecraft, if you have anything to add or any more verses in the Bible that really explain what these gods are, please send them to me. I'd love to hear about it. Peace to everybody. And I guess that's it. I guess it's the only good thing to say is peace. So peace to you guys. Have a nice day. This is Joseph from JohnTheHutDweller. I just wanted to bring up something I was thinking about because I was reading H.P. Lovecraft, or at least equivalent of it. There's some audiobooks of his, and also reading some stuff online. Baal, Dagon, Astaroth, Moloch, Asherah. If you've ever heard about Orientalism or the Renaissance Egyptology, this wrong Hellenized view of how the past should have been or would have been with these magical practices. And we know, no, it's all, I mean, it's all combined with the lure of Freemasonry and all those other secret societies. All those grew up around the same time. They all had the same misconceptions of Egypt and the opposing god of Elohim, or Eloi, or if you want to, Elohim just means gods. Eloi was actually, or Eloi would be speaking to him. El would be the god. That he was just an opponent of Baal, and some say, well, it's the same. It's the same god. They're both ancient bull god cults. Which is why the ancient Israelites had bulls in the north instead of cherubim. Well, I mean, main difference between the two kingdoms is one worshipped God with cherubim, the other worshipped God with bulls, golden bulls. Why would the story of the golden calf? Why, out of everything, why would they make a calf? It wasn't an Egyptian symbol, primarily Canaanite, But I look up these pictures of Dagon and the fish god. Where is that mentioned? Well, no, it's kind of like I think the Ashura were the poles, though the phallic poles that they had. We don't know much about these gods, do we? We only see Dagon mentioned briefly in the Bible. I think he's only mentioned 2, 3 times in there. Moloch, same thing, maybe 5, 7. Baal is just their name for. I mean, we don't know. It could be